Today, we're diving into one of the most significant and shocking battles of World War II. It took place in the final freezing months of the war, and it's called the Battle of the Bulge.
It's a weird name for a battle, right? A bulge? But that simple shape on a military map tells an incredible story of a desperate last-ditch gamble and unbelievable courage. So let's break down exactly how it all happened.
Okay, so let's set the stage. It's late 1944. The Allies are closing in from all sides, and it really looks like Germany is about to lose the war. But Hitler, he decides to risk everything on one final massive surprise attack. Now, the military term for this is an offensive. And we're not talking about a small fight here. An offensive is a huge, all-out attack. The goal was to punch a giant hole right through the Allied lines and totally flip the script of the war. And what a plan it was. Seriously, it was incredibly ambitious. Step 1. Attack through the Ardennes forest, a place the Allies thought was totally impassable for tanks. Step 2. Use that surprise to literally cut the Allied armies in half. And the grand prize, Step 3. Capture the port of Antwerp, which was the supply hub for the entire Allied war effort. To pull this off, everything had to be done in absolute secrecy. We're talking about moving hundreds of thousands of soldiers and tons of equipment, but only in the dead of night. They even sent in German spies wearing American uniforms to cause confusion. But the most important piece of the puzzle? They waited for really bad weather, knowing it would keep the Allies' powerful air force from flying. With every piece perfectly in place, the trap was sprung. In the middle of a brutal winter, the attack began, catching the Allies completely by surprise and creating the bulge that gave this battle its famous name. On December 16th, the quiet, snowy forest just exploded. A massive artillery bombardment opened up, and then hundreds of German tanks and thousands of soldiers came pouring out of the trees. For the American soldiers there, many of whom were brand new to the war, it was an absolute nightmare. And this is exactly how the battle got its name. The German attack was so powerful at first that it pushed the Allied defensive line way, way back. So when the generals looked at their maps, the front line wasn't straight anymore. It had this huge curve, this big bulge pushed into it. But the soldiers weren't just fighting each other. They were fighting the weather itself. This was one of the coldest winters Europe had seen in years. We're talking temperatures way below freezing. Soldiers got terrible frostbite. The ground was frozen so hard you couldn't dig a foxhole for cover, and even tank engines would freeze up. But despite the shock, the surprise, and the freezing cold, the Allied soldiers refused to break. The Germans' lightning-fast attacks started to slow down, and the struggle to push them back began. This is where the tide really starts to turn. And a lot of that turnaround centers on a small Belgian town called Bastogne. Why was it so important? Well, it was a critical crossroads. 7 major roads all met there. If you controlled Bastogne, you controlled all the movement in the area. Pretty soon, the Germans had the town completely surrounded. Now, the soldiers trapped inside defending this crucial town were from the American 101st Airborne Division. These guys are paratroopers, elite soldiers, trained to be dropped from planes, often behind enemy lines, and fight while surrounded. You could say they were the perfect soldiers for this impossible job. The situation in Bastogne was grim. The Americans were outnumbered, outgunned, and freezing. The Germans sent a messenger demanding they surrender. The American commander, General McAuliffe, gave one of the most famous replies in all of military history, a single word: nuts. It was a clear, defiant message that gave a huge morale boost to his troops. It meant, we are not giving up, ever. So remember how the Germans counted on bad weather? Well, for the first week, it worked. Thick clouds kept Allied planes on the ground. But on December 23rd, the weather broke. The sun came out, and that changed everything. Suddenly, thousands of Allied planes were in the sky, hammering German tanks and, just as importantly, dropping desperately needed food, medicine, and ammo to the defenders of Bastogne. You see, a battle isn't just won by fighting. It's also won with supplies. And that brings us to a super important military idea: logistics. In simple terms, logistics is the whole process of getting the right stuff to the right people at the right time. And for the Germans, their logistics were about to totally fall apart. Here's the problem. Those big, powerful German tanks were major gas guzzlers. The whole German plan relied on capturing Allied fuel depots to keep their tanks moving. But they couldn't do it. Then, once the skies cleared, Allied planes blew up their supply trucks.
Soon, German tanks were literally running out of gas and just being abandoned on the side of the road. The attack ground to a halt.
So, the German gamble had failed. Now it was the Allies' turn to go on the attack, to flatten the Bulge and end the battle once and for all. But this victory was going to come at a staggering human cost. With the German advance stopped cold, the Allies launched a massive counteroffensive. They attacked the Bulge from both the north and the south, essentially squeezing the German forces, trying to trap them and push the front line back to where it started. The fighting that followed was incredibly fierce. For the United States, the Battle of the Bulge would become the single largest and bloodiest battle of the entire war. Over 19,000 American soldiers lost their lives. And the cost for Germany was even more catastrophic. It's estimated that they suffered around 100,000 casualties, soldiers who were killed or wounded. It was a devastating blow that their armies simply could not recover from. So let's look at the final outcome. For Germany, the offensive was a complete failure. They used up the last of their experienced soldiers and best tanks and got nothing. For the Allies, it was an incredibly tough victory that put them back where they started, but now the path into Germany itself was wide open. And that's really the biggest takeaway here. Hitler's last big gamble didn't just fail, it backfired spectacularly. By throwing everything he had into this one attack, he basically destroyed his own army's ability to fight back, and that helped speed up the end of the war in Europe. So why do we still talk about this battle so much today? Well, it's become a powerful symbol of Allied courage against all odds. It's also a perfect lesson in why logistics, getting your supplies right, is so critical. And of course, it's remembered as the final brutal obstacle on the path to victory in Europe. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. How can a single battle fought in a frozen forest teach us two such different but equally important lessons? On one hand, it shows the incredible power of human determination and courage, and on the other, it proves that even the mightiest army can be stopped dead in its tracks if it runs out of gasoline.